Welcome to the Daily AI News Digest for July 6, 2026. This explainer is sponsored by bestai.org. We're cutting through the noise today to bring you a purely data-driven look at the artificial intelligence market. Let's get right into today's market realities.
On our rundown today, we'll look at the biggest market moves, dig into product and model realities, review the latest regulation and policy signals, offer the analyst's take, and wrap up with our market watch.
Starting off with Section 1, our biggest moves today in capital and geopolitics.
If you want to understand the sheer scale of capital moving in Beijing right now, just look at Kuaishou Technology's generative video unit Kling AI. They officially secured $2.8 billion in a new funding round. That massive capital injection puts the subsidiary at an $18 billion post-money valuation. It's actually the largest single venture capital raise we've seen in the history of the generative video sector. Market reports indicate this spin-off is highly structured, essentially priming Kling AI for a potential public listing in Hong Kong as early as 2027.
When you look closely at the consortium of 38 investors involved here, it reveals a very pragmatic approach from major Chinese tech players. For instance, Tencent Holdings threw $200 million into this round. What's analytically fascinating about that is the strategic hedging. Tencent already operates its own direct competitor in the generative video space, the Hunyuan model. And yet, because this sector is so capital-intensive, we're seeing major conglomerates willingly invest in rival subsidiaries. They are making these moves to guarantee they have exposure to whoever ends up being the market leader.
The fundamentals supporting that $18 billion valuation are firmly rooted in cold business reality. Kling AI generated over 650 million yuan in revenue during the first quarter of 2026. That is a year-over-year growth rate exceeding 300%. But perhaps more critically for institutional investors, the unit reached a $500 million annualized revenue run rate by March. So what is the takeaway here? It means monetization in generative video is maturing much faster than initial projections. This technology is already generating real profit, moving well past the phase of just being an experimental novelty.
Moving on to Section 2, Product and Model Realities, focusing on GPT-5.6 and the Kirin 2026. OpenAI has officially initiated a highly controlled, staggered preview of its new GPT-5.6 model family. Right now, deployment is restricted to government-vetted enterprise partners via codecs and the API. They've broken this down into 3 tiers. The flagship model, Sol, is priced at $5 per million input tokens and $30 for output. Terra, the mid-tier option, cuts those costs exactly in half. And then there's Luna, which provides high-throughput inference at just $1 for input and $6 for output. This tiered pricing is a very clear signal. They are making a definitive pivot towards specific enterprise operational efficiencies rather than just broad consumer use. If we look closely at that flagship Sol model, the technical benchmarks are quite substantive. It achieved a 91.9% score on Terminal Bench 2.1, and it introduces a new feature called Ultra Mode, which utilizes coordinated subagents. In practical terms, this means the AI can independently plan and execute complex computer tasks without needing a human to guide it step by step. But perhaps most notably, OpenAI integrated a layered safeguard stack. This is a safety architecture that actively monitors output for cyber and biological misuse. If it detects a risk, it automatically pauses the generation to run a secondary context review.
Now, let's look at the hardware constraints governing these models. Huawei's semiconductor division just published version 2 of its scaling paper. The empirical data released today shows their upcoming Kirin 2026 chip achieves a transistor density of 238 million transistors per square millimeter. That is a 53.5% leap from their previous generation. And they manage this not through traditional geometric shrinking, but by using a 1.5 micron 3D hybrid bonding architecture. Basically, instead of trying to shrink the chips further, they're efficiently stacking them to get these massive computing gains.
That updated paper also lays out a rigid, long-term engineering roadmap. By applying this new scaling method, Huawei is targeting CPU core speeds exceeding 4 GHz by 2029. And more significantly, they project they'll achieve a transistor density equivalent to a 14 angstrom, or 1.4 nanometer process node, by the year 2031. What we're looking at here is a clear, verifiable timeline for hardware evolution that is operating entirely outside of traditional Western supply chains.
This brings us to Section 3, Regulation and Policy Signals, Global Dialogues and State Rollouts.
Over in Geneva, the United Nations has opened its global dialogue on artificial intelligence governance. The summit kicked off with a rather stark report from the independent scientific panel. They warned that the development of frontier models is currently outpacing global institutional safeguards. A major focus of these diplomatic discussions is what they're calling the AI divide. This addresses the reality that the global AI market is effectively a US and China duopoly, which leaves non-aligned member states trying to navigate some very deep dependencies regarding their infrastructure and data sovereignty.
Moving to domestic policy, the integration of AI into public infrastructure just took a measured step forward. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced a first-of-its-kind statewide partnership with Anthropic. Through the state's centralized IT portal, all California state agencies, as well as local cities and counties, can now access Anthropic's Claude models at a 50% discount. That access comes bundled with direct technical assistance from Anthropic developers.
And this isn't just a theoretical agreement. It is an active operational deployment. The California DMV is already utilizing these models to optimize customer service wait times. The Department of Healthcare Services is integrating the technology into their internal Medicaid workflows. Meanwhile, state cyber defense agencies are actively piloting Claude to scan and patch code vulnerabilities. So for the average person, this indicates that AI is no longer confined to tech hubs. It is actively managing the line at your local DMV and securing public data systems. Let's transition to Section 4, the analysts' take on these regulated infrastructure rollouts. When you look at the restricted, partner-only release of OpenAI's GPT-5.6, it provides empirical evidence of a fundamental shift in the tech sector. Frontier AI releases are simply no longer standard software updates. Because of their dual-use capabilities in areas like cybersecurity and biology, these flagship models are effectively becoming regulated, government-gated infrastructure rollouts. The era of frictionless consumer launches we saw back in 2023 has been replaced by rigorous federal alignment and national security reviews. And we are seeing this shift materialize directly in boardroom negotiations. Multiple sources are now reporting that OpenAI executives are discussing an unprecedented step, offering a 5% equity stake directly to the US government. The reported strategy here is to tightly align the company with national security interests, while simultaneously sharing the wealth generated by the AI boom through a public investment vehicle. Make no mistake, if this is executed, it would irrevocably blur the lines between private frontier tech developers and the federal government. Finally, Section 5, our outro and market watch. Over the coming quarters, institutional focus is going to center on three main catalysts. First, we'll be watching the structural preparations for Kling AI's public listing, especially following that $18 billion valuation. Second is the real-world performance validation of Huawei's Kirin 2026 chip when those devices actually hit the market this autumn. And third, we are closely tracking these ongoing equity negotiations between Washington and major US AI developers. Those talks could permanently alter the capital structure of the entire industry. That wraps up today's explainer of the Daily AI News Digest. As always, a quick reminder to visit today's sponsor, bestai.org, for more data-driven insights. As we watch AI transition from open software to government-gated infrastructure, it really begs a larger question. Are we witnessing the end of the open AI boom and the beginning of a new digital Cold War? Thank you for joining us for this measured, fact-focused analysis. We'll see you next time.